Hello and welcome to the Rails Board Meeting. I'm Michael Campbell, President of the Rails Board Meeting. It's Friday, October 23rd, 2020, and I'd like to call this meeting to order. Emily, will you please call roll?
Sure. Sue Busenbark.
Here.
Michael Campbell.
Here.
Here.
Kelly Cox.
Here.
Percy Harris.
Here.
Diane Hollister.
Here.
Chris Kenny.
Here.
Sarah McCone Chase.
Here.
Paul Mills.
Here.
Jenna Nemec-Louisi.
Here.
Scott Poynton.
Here.
Becky Spratford.
Here.
Thomas Stagg.
Here.
Beth Teppen.
Here.
Alex Vancina.
Here. All set?
Okay,
All
thank
set.
you. Okay, in accordance with the Government Emergency Administrative Act, the Rails Board of Directors finds an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent and believes it's in best interest of Rails to hold a virtual meeting to perform essential business. Everyone, please remember to unmute yourselves before you speak and to say your name when making a motion or a comment. All votes will be held by roll call. So thank you for keeping that in mind. So we will handle guest and public comments at the same time. So let's start with the guest here in Burr Ridge. Deidre, will you start?
Yes. Deirdre Brennan, Rails.
Monica Harris, Rails.
Any public comments from Burr
Nope.
Ridge? Okay, East Peoria.
Kendall Morrison, Rails.
Any public comments from East Peoria?
I am comment free.
Okay. How about the Illinois State Library?
Greg McCormick.
Karen Egan.
Are there any public comments from the Illinois State Library?
No.
Okay, thank you. Emily, do you have any other guests who are participating via Zoom?
Yes. Myself, Emily Feister. Jenny Mills. Sorry, Amy De La Fuente, Jim Krieger, Carolyn Coulter, Mark Hatch, Megan Millen, Dan Bostrom, Jody Rubel, Brian Hebel, Brian Shepard, Joe Philippek, Ann Slaughter, Mary Witt. Did I get everyone?
Okay, great, thank you. If Emily has not read your name, if you could please state your name and your affiliation and put it in the Zoom chat so that she can read it and add it to the minutes, that would help. Did you receive any comments, Emily, via email?
I did not.
Okay. If not, does anyone else have any public comments at this time?
I have a public comment.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Megan Millen, Executive Director of Joliet Public Library, and I'm here today to advocate for a reduction in quarantine times for materials. At the beginning of the pandemic, when little was understood about transmission, a whole host of measures were widely implemented to try to mitigate the spread. Over time, the science has borne out that the most prevalent cause of spread is close contact with the infected individuals. To date, no major outbreaks or really any infections can be traced to surface contact with objects, including library books. The REALM study, which was conducted in lab conditions, have proven only how long trace amounts of virus can live on various surfaces, and has by its own admission provided no scientific interpretation of these findings for a practical setting. Other states have turned over the REALM study to their departments of health for just such an analysis and have published their findings. As a result, the vast majority of states are now quarantining their materials from 1 to 3 days. our 7-day quarantine is an outlier and has presented many practical problems for our staff and patrons. Most importantly, though, it is the long-term damage to our brand that is concerning. By needing to explain to patrons over and over and over why their return materials remain on their cards, we're shining a spotlight on the fact that we run, and really have always kind of run, a germy business. By saying we think we need to put these items into storage for a full 7 days, what that translates into in their mind is the items you are sharing with us could kill us. That's not the message that public libraries want to send to the people who fund us. This could have a lasting, damaging effect. I urge the Rails Board to join with other states and reduce our quarantine time to something more reasonable. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Megan. I believe we are discussing this later in the agenda. Okay, we'll move on to number 5, adoption of the agenda. May I have a motion and a second for adoption of the agenda?
Jenna Nemec-Louisi, so moved.
Sarah McCone-Chase, second.
I have a move by Jenna and a second by Alex. Emily, will you please call roll?
Sue Busenbark,
Yes.
Michael Campbell,
Yes.
Hallie Cox,
Yes.
Percy Harris,
Yes.
Diane Hollister,
Yes.
Chris Kenny,
Yes.
Sarah McCone-Chase,
Yes.
Paul Mills,
Yes.
Jenna Nemec-Louisi,
Yes.
Scott Poynton,
Yes.
Becky Spratford,
Yes.
Thomas Stagg,
Yes.
Beth Tepin,
Yes.
Alex Vancina.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item number 6, the approval of the Rails Board minutes, financial reports and expenditures. 6.1, may I have a motion for approval of the minutes of the September 25th, 2020 Rails regular board meeting?
Sue Busenbark, I'll move to accept the minutes.
I'll second. It's Chris.
We had a move by Alex and a second by, I couldn't hear who was seconded.
Chris.
Who?
Chris.
Chris, okay.
Oh.
So Emily, will you please call roll?
Sue Busenbark,
Yes.
Michael Campbell,
I'll abstain.
Hallie Cox,
Yes.
Percy Harris,
Yes.
Diane Hollister,
Yes.
Chris Kenny,
Yes.
Sarah McCone-Chase,
Yes.
Paul Mills,
Yes.
Jenna Nemec-Louisi,
Yes.
Scott Poynton,
Yes.
Becky Spratford,
Yes.
Thomas Stagg,
Yes.
Beth Tepin,
Yes.
Alex Vancina.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Item number 6.1.2, which is the Rails Executive Committee meetings from October 5th, 2020. May I have a motion and a second from a committee member for approval of those minutes?
Paul Mills, so moved.
Okay, and a second?
Tom Stagg, second.
Thank you. Emily, will you please call roll?
Michael Campbell,
Yes?
Diane Hollister,
Yes.
Sarah McCone-Chase,
Yes.
Paul Mills,
Yes.
Thomas Stagg.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Moving right along, we'll move into the Rails financial report with Jim Krager. Jim?
Hello. Oh, you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. You have the report for September 2020. We're 1/4 through the fiscal year already. Highlights of it are unassigned general fund cash balances are 14.3 million, and it represents an estimated 15.5 months of coverage of operations. That's up about a month and a half from a month ago, as on the last day of the month, we received a grant payment of just over 1.6 million area per capita grant payment, which is actually part of our fiscal year 21 allocation. It came from the general fund portion of the allocation. So that is included in the September financials, but on the next day, October 1st, we received the remaining area per capita payments due from us from fiscal year 20, which amounted to 5,362,500. So in next month's report, our coverage is going to increase by about 6 months. But I don't know what we will receive after that on our fiscal year 21 payments. Other than that, we should, we typically receive about 1.9 million of the federal portion of our grant during November. So we'll see. But the general fund payment that we did receive on September 30th was several months ahead of the date that we received that same payment last year, as was the final payment for fiscal year 20. But I don't think that means the state is in a better cash position. I'm not sure what triggered it. Maybe it's Greg's clout at the state library. I don't know. But anyway, it was good news, and we are in a once again a good cash position. And but going forward, I don't know what the timing will be. The investment income has remained well below budget, as interest rates are 0.113% and 0.16% on our funds. We budgeted 1%, which was considerably below the prior year's average. But that can move rapidly. The expenditures, general fund expenditures through September were 332,000 below budget. Pretty much the same variances as I've been talking about. I note the postage and printing expenditures were 54,000 under budget, as that included the budgeted replacement purchase of 95 of all our laptop computers this year, and we're deferring that. Travel expenditures, we've only incurred $532 of travel expenditures in 3 months. That's going to continue, as virtually all conferences that I know of for fiscal year 21 are, if they're scheduled at all, they're scheduled remotely, so it wouldn't involve any travel. Our full year travel budget is $110,000, so that should be a fairly major experienced budget. Personnel expenditures are slightly below budget, including lower health, dental, and life insurance. And as I think you know, or I talked about, Limerick is switching its coverage to Aetna after 24 years with Blue Cross Blue Shield, because Blue Cross Blue Shield's premiums were going to be quite higher next year, and the Aetna premiums will be the same amount as those charged in calendar year 2020, and Rails will save approximately $64,000 in premiums, and its employees $21,000 on their share of the premiums for this next year because of this move. And in the special revenue funds, they continue active, particularly the census, which is now winding up, and will conclude in the next month or so. And that is pretty much it. Are there any questions? Okay. Hearing none, we could move to the expenditures. There's a listing of our expenditures for the month of September, which is at the end of your report. They're detailed out. Do I have any question? They amount to $897,467.16. Do I have any questions? If not, this is a roll call vote.
Okay, thanks,
Thank
Jim.
you. You're welcome.
Any questions, discussion? Okay. May I have a motion for approval of the expenditures for September 2020?
Moved by Becky.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Percy Harris, second.
Thank you. Emily, will you call roll?
Sure. Sue Busenberg,
Yes.
Michael Campbell,
Yes.
Sally Cox,
Yes.
Percy Harris,
Yes.
Diane Hollister,
Yes.
Chris Kenny,
Yes.
Sarah McCone Chase,
Yes.
Paul Mills,
Yes.
Jenna Namek-Louisi,
Yes.
Scott Poynton,
Yes.
Becky Spratford,
Yes.
Thomas Stagg,
Yes.
Beth Tippin,
Yes.
and Alex Vincina.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Moving right along to item number 7, reports. Item 7.1, reports from the Rails president. I don't have a report, so we'll move to item 7.2, Rails board committee reports from the committee chair. So we'll move to the advocacy committee. Jenna, do you have a report for the advocacy?
I do. The Rails Board Advocacy Committee did not meet in October because we were spending most of our time preparing for the session that we led at the ILA virtual conference this past Wednesday. Was it Wednesday? It was Wednesday. Our conference session was on library ecosystems, essential collaborations between school and public libraries, and how to do it. The focus of that session was mainly how do we make that collaboration happen? And how do we make sure that that collaboration is on the radar of our school administrators and our funders and our trustees and everybody who needs to see the important collaborations that are happening between school and public libraries. So our panel was comprised of moderator Deirdre Brennan, our illustrious leader who did an amazing job helping us to navigate all of our content. And then our panelists included Michael Campbell, myself, Christy Samandi, the current president of ISLE, and Amy Walsh, who works at Joliet West High School and was able to give us lots of great details about all of the collaborations that she has done with Joliet Public Library. So it was really a wonderful session. It was well attended by over 20 people. And I know that we have had the opportunity to get some evaluations back. I know I have not yet had the opportunity to take a look at our respondents' the comments from our attendees, but I know that all of us as panelists feel that it went really well and everybody was really pleased to collaborate with one another and to be a part of the big thinking on that. So our, just real briefly, we talked about, we had a school library profile. So Christy Samandi, ISLE president, got to give us really a snapshot of what school libraries in Illinois look like and the trends and challenges that we're facing, some of which I'll address during our board development topic later today. We talked about collaboration in theory, so why it's important to do it. And then we talked about collaboration in practice, which is some baseline for helping us to get started. And finally, the meat of our presentation was how can we collaborate to advocate and how can we advocate to collaborate? And so that is my report. We're going to be meeting again as a committee early next month, and I look forward to delivering our next report at that time. So thank you very much for your time, everyone.
And Jenna and Deidre did a fantastic job, I have to say.
So did you, Michael.
Yes, you did, Michael.
Really well.
No,
Yeah.
Jenna, you were great.
Thank you.
We'll fight over it.
Yeah, exactly.
Mutual Admiration Society.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yes.
And the session, the reports that people filled out, they were all 100%. So so you got your. Paul, consortium committee.
Yes, sir. The consortia committee did meet on Monday, October 19th, which was this week. Topics that we covered included an update on eRead Illinois and also Rails deals and discounts. And if I may add an editorial comment, Layla Heath does a fabulous job securing wonderful pricing packages for members of Rails. My library has personally benefited from that, and we also talked about how that integrates with consortial deals. Rails provides many valuable services. A great thing about this particular one is you can really point to a monetary amount. That's a very easy thing to demonstrate about the purchasing power that Rails has. So thank you, Layla, and thank you, Rails, for that service. It's very much appreciated.
Convey that. Thank you.
Oh, that's right. Layla's probably not on. Well, she definitely should hear that.
Okay.
We also had a report from Deirdre and Grant about the annual library certification, and I won't go into details for that because I suspect that might be a topic in your report or elsewhere. Sometime, yes. And then we also heard from the Illinois State Library about upcoming per capita grant application changes, and I will defer details on that since I know we have a report coming later from the Illinois State Library. We also had a conversation, which has been an ongoing one, about consortia and the impact of COVID-19 on that. And it was a spirited conversation, which I think really highlights the diversity of libraries in the state of Illinois and how we each serve unique communities and have different needs and requirements for that. As that's a good group with many good viewpoints. So anything else for those who'd like to add here at the committee meeting?
Okay, thank you, Paul. Our newest committee, the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee, Diane Hollister.
Yes, well, thus far, we have not had a committee meeting because we're just in the nascent stages of the EDI committee coming into existence. But as an update to this, I have talked to Deirdre several times to get a groundwork laid of how we're going to pursue the opening of this committee, members, and I've been seeking guidance from her. Thus far, we have no meeting set in stone, but one thing I wanted to add, I'm very, very pleased with the response that we've received from individuals expressing an interest in engaging on the EDI committee.
Yes, definitely.
Lots of interest in that committee.
Yeah, I think we had almost 40 people from
Yes.
all types of libraries.
That's
Yeah.
great.
That's
great.
It's
Yeah.
just been overwhelming, yes.
Yep.
The executive committee did meet, and we'll discuss that shortly. Policy committee, Thomas Stagg.
Sir, we did not meet.
Okay. Resource sharing committee, Deidre.
Did not meet.
Okay. Universal Service Committee, Sue Busenberg.
Did not meet.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move to item 7.3, the Rails report, the Rails monthly report.
Thank you. So you have my written report, and I guess I will just amplify a couple of things. We are going to be closed on Election Day. We went back and forth about that, but the state library is closed, and it just seemed to make the most sense based on the way the law, or whatever it is, was written. So we're doing that. A lot of people went to ILA this week from Rails. There were a lot of presents. What am I trying to say? Programs. And as you've just heard about a couple of them, Ann Slaughter and Brian Smith also presented on L2. Grant did a couple of presentations about data. I don't want to leave anybody out, but I know I am. But I don't know, do you know anybody else, Monica?
I watched Dan's.
Oh, yes, Dan. I'm sorry, Dan. I know you're out there. Dan did some. Did Layla or Anna?
I don't.
Yeah.
And
Anyway.
you did the one on universal service.
Yes, I did one
I went to that one too.
with Catherine Yanukovsky, bless her, who ended up calling in on her phone.
And she did great. It was.
Yeah, I mean, and that was her first ILA presentation ever, she said.
Oh.
So
She did well.
thank you, Megan, wherever you are. And then there's a lot in my report about the quarantine, which we're going to talk about later. So I did want to draw your attention to that, and in particular, the fact that we did have this meeting last week with the State Library, Carly, and Heartland. We told them that we wanted to change the quarantine, as many of you are here to say or support. There was a strong desire for us to keep doing the same thing. All of us to do the same thing. And I said, well, a desire to hear from IDPH, Illinois Department of Public Health. I said, well, we can certainly give it some time, but there's already been a lot of time passed and they haven't given any guidance. I don't have a lot of confidence, sorry, that they will. But anyway, so here we are today. So we're going to talk about it later because, not only would we be, I know because I agree with it, moving the quarantine, loosening it back to 3 days at this point, but, we're going to be not doing what the rest of the state is doing. So I just want the board to be sure that they understand that and support it. So I will stop talking and happy to answer questions.
Any questions for Deidre? Okay. We'll move on to the Rail Service of the Month. This month it's the Census Report with Amy.
Hi, everybody. So again, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure working on the census initiative, and I'm sure if you followed any sorts of news, you knew that it was very up and down between things that were coming down through the Census Bureau, through the national government, and then of course, everyone's favorite, COVID-19. So just a recap of some of where we started. So we were awarded 2 different grants. So the first one was in the beginning of about a year ago. And we ended up working with 25 subrecipients, 21 of them libraries. And then due to COVID-19, the state of Illinois extended their census work because there were still many people that we had not counted at that point. So then we were awarded additional funding for the FY21 grant period. And we had 5 of our original subrecipients continue. And we also put a huge emphasis on supporting other libraries in the Rails network. So just a refresher about hard to count populations. There are many of them, and the state assigned us these 6 in red due to the very diverse communities that our libraries exist in. Some of them were already focusing on additional hard to count populations, such as people who speak other languages, people lacking Wi-Fi, that sort of thing. So what did we do? We did a lot during this time. One of our primary responsibilities was to support our subrecipients. So we had weekly meetings in order to share information from the state. We provided a lot of technical assistance because the state requested a lot of us in terms of reporting and documentation. We promoted idea and resource sharing among our subrecipients and tried to have this collegial environment so that people could feel comfortable reaching out to one another on topics that were familiar. And we, or not me, but this is more of our, the Rails communications team. They promoted the census via many different Rails communications, from their weekly e-news to the social media. Later on, we had Rails Minutes. We had a Pulse page. Rails also hosted webinars and roundtables about the census. We connected other organizations to our libraries, And toward the end of the grant, we hosted a legislative information meeting with many of our elected officials that had approved of this funding from the state. Along the way, we formed many partnerships, such as Forefront, which is a philanthropic organization, Age Options, an organization that works primarily with older adults. I presented at a webinar with them back in February, highlighting the different ways that our libraries were reaching older adults. We shared some of our digital resources and other information with Illinois Heartland Library System. We partnered with Chicago Public Library in order to connect them to local regional intermediaries so that they could bring their census work to the library and help get out the count. And a small partnership connecting libraries in the South Suburban area to the Homewood Science Center. So there was a lot of outreach that occurred before, during, and after COVID-19. And I just really have to commend our libraries for coming up with really great creative ways in order to reach the community in a variety of ways during different time periods that we had this work happening. And in just a minute, I'll be sharing just some photos of some of this work that they have documented, kind of showing what they were doing both inside their library and out with partners in the community. So on that note, here we go with a, it's not a photo montage, but just kind of a smattering of things that were happening. And this is kind of in a chronological order fashion. So I think this was back in either January or February. So we see libraries engaging with community events. Although the food pantry was not a library, they were a subrecipient. And this was just one way that they did work in their community. We had a lot of outreach with children under 5 because children under 5 are often undercounted, and our libraries are primed to meet the needs of that population based on their outstanding programming. We also had school outreach. So a lot of our libraries partnered with their local school districts and made specific census presentations, not only to families, but to the actual students themselves, because it's been shown that that children are often a really great trusted messenger about the census. They go home and share that information with their families. Many of our libraries hosted numerous job fairs because one of the important aspects of the census is that they recruit people from communities to be enumerators and participate in that. We had several libraries that utilized their existing programming with adults, such as English language learning classes, in order to talk about the importance of the census. We had many of our libraries order We Count books and distribute them to families during their early childhood story times in order to promote the census. We had some of our libraries out in the community at different events promoting their position in the community, but also promoting their work on the census. And we also had some innovative ways to reach different populations such as the homeless population. And this was an idea from the Glenside Public Library District that soon became very popular, especially once COVID-19 hit, and a lot of people were utilizing food pantries and other community resources. And of course, yard signs were extremely popular. Our libraries use different ways in order to reach their community, whether they send out postcards from the library, emails, newsletters from the library, or actually hosted events bringing the community together. They advertised on public transportation in various languages. And then COVID-19 hit and everything moved online. So what was supposed to be a wonderful day of celebration on April 1st, in which I think every single one of our libraries had a fantastic event planned, they had to either cancel their events or somehow transition to online. So if you were in the West Chicago Public Library District, you might have witnessed this Elvis census concert. And who can forget how important the count is on the census? And unfortunately, Aurora Public Library did not get to have that event, but they did try to keep the count in mind of everybody in terms of the census. We saw a lot of creativity once COVID-19 hit and people were stuck at home and gravitating towards social media, and everybody was forced to make a hard pivot in order to keep getting the message out. So we had a lot of library staff come together and, do their own montage, Zoom montage of, explaining why it's important to count. We had libraries that again targeted children and their families during story times to communicate the importance of counting. One of our subrecipients, the DuPage County, they had a series of PSAs with various elected officials encouraging people to complete their census. Our libraries kicked it into top notch by featuring storytime events, programming in which the programming is geared towards children and families, but they would take a moment and do maybe a 15 to 30 second PSA reminding families to complete the census. We also had a wonderful opportunity for our subrecipients to enter into a video contest, and Poplar Creek Public Library was in, I think, the top 9 or top 10 of the winners. And so you can congratulate your fellow board member, Christine Kenny, for being part of this wonderful initiative. We continue to see communities try to promote the census while we were still in this phase of social distancing. A lot of our libraries continue to partner with community organizations and take the opportunity to use all of their promotional materials and swag and census related things to get them out into the community, because they could no longer do so in their own libraries because libraries were closed, but a lot of food pantries were open. We had creative community outreach. If you needed to go someplace and get your basic food, some libraries like Highwood actually put stickers on some of the items so that you would be reminded of the importance of the census. Whoops, excuse me. Let's see, one of our subrecipients is a child care resource and referral, and so they held a diaper drive. Addison Public Library engaged with residents once curbside pickup became the norm for all libraries to start reaching out to their residents. So one of the things that happened when COVID-19 happened is that some of the funding that we had allocated for technology to reach out to some of our smaller libraries, that was no longer a viable option. And so we had to figure out how to utilize those resources. And one of the things that we did was invest in a census ebook collection with BiblioBoard. So this was available for all Illinois residents to access, and there were links in this collection so that if you clicked on the link, you could automatically land on the homepage of the census website and complete the census. We also use some of those resources to who engage in digital marketing. So you could see here, we had this Care About the Count theme, and there were lots of resources like posters and yard signs and digital content. And they also took over our social media for several months and ended up reaching a lot of people in our communities in the state of Illinois. So then the fiscal year 20 grant ended, and we had to reboot for fiscal year 21. And like I mentioned before, we transitioned into supporting a lot of our other libraries with promotional materials. So we created community packs and had items that were available a la carte, such as bookmarks, and libraries could place an order so that they could distribute them at their curbside pickup or at their limited operational hours. So we had t-shirts, face masks, yard signs. We created these biblioboard postcards so that residents could take advantage of accessing the census, as well as over 450 ebooks in that collection. We had posters, we had flyers, we had yard signs, we had branded hand sanitizer. And something else we did was take advantage of our delivery services, and we ordered magnets and put them on all of our delivery vans so that there would just be that visible image of the census is still happening. Here's how you can reach the census website and complete your census. We had more videos during this second round of grant funding from our some of our subrecipients. We had folks employ their bookmobiles and their children's book characters at community events. We had Oswego Public Library use their book bike to help promote the census and engage residents. We had we had outreach staff going out to churches and food distribution lines in order to reach people. This photo here on the right is actually from the Lincolnwood Library, and they had let us know that they took some of the resources that we sent them and created these community packs geared toward families, and it was a huge success, and they were very grateful that we were able to contribute those items so that they could partner with different organizations in their community and get the word out about the census. We had libraries that work directly in the community. They promoted the census via radio, at bus shelters and billboards. Community events that were targeting specific hard-to-count populations. So Highwood held an event this summer, and so did the North Chicago Public Library, targeting their Spanish-speaking residents. What did we accomplish? Illinois surpassed their 2010 response rate of 70.5%, so almost an entire percentage point. So I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but it does bring a lot more dollars into our state. All of the collar counties that we were tasked to work in surpassed their 2010 rates. We provided resources to assist thousands of Illinois residents and help them complete the census in over 33 counties. We also put a spotlight on libraries as community change makers. That's something that I continue to hear in my weekly meetings with the state of Illinois and then with our UIC data partners, as people kept saying, who knew libraries could turn this out? Who knew libraries could step up to this challenge and do so much? And lastly, we introduced the state of Illinois to Rails. People didn't know who we were. Now, we've worked with 30 other regional intermediaries across the state, and we've made a name for what we can do. So lastly, I just want to say thank you to the Rails team for a huge effort to make this a successful endeavor. Specifically, Karen Goyer, I could not have done this without her because she was my right-hand assistant, keeping everything organized. The admin team was very helpful, especially when we had to process and prepare all of these orders to go out in delivery. Of course, the delivery team for driving and, yes, they had other things to deliver, but for a while they were delivering a lot of census materials all over. Our finance team for constantly monitoring and checking to make sure that everything was financially ready to go to cut checks to reimburse these subrecipients. The communications and marketing team for all their work with creating materials, the social media, the weekly e-news, and folks from those teams that helped us work with the marketing team for a short time. Let me see. And then, of course, guidance and support from Deirdre. And thank you to you folks on the board who agreed to participate in this initiative a little over a year ago. So that is the end of my presentation on this grant. And I'm open to any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Amy. Great job.
Thank you.
On the census and on the report too. I mean, you guys can see, I'm sure, it was the changes that Amy had to deal with. Well, all of us, obviously, or many of us, but was, I mean, sometimes in the same day we got, conflicting information. So always cheerful, always moving forward. It was. And the libraries were just fantastic. All of the subrecipients were fantastic.
Thank you, Amy. And now we'll go to item 7.4, the Illinois State Library Report.
Good afternoon, everyone. Wanted to make a couple of quick announcements before I go through the report. Yesterday, we received a report that the state library had been closed down due to COVID. I want to assure everyone that is not true. We are here and operating. I'm not sure where that originated, but it was coming from several sources apparently around the state. And the second one is that Karen Egan has not retired as the Associate Director of Library Development at the State Library. So that too was floating around yesterday, but she is here joining me, and we assure you she is here for a while at least. So following up on what Paul indicated regarding public library per capita, I am happy to announce today we do have some final determinations on that grant program. And first of all, the due date shall be March 15, 2021, which is a change from this past year of January 15. All public libraries should be looking for a notice from our office regarding the availability of the application. If you go to the state library's website today, the link to that is not there. It will be going up as soon as possible. In anticipation, and the question about requirements. The requirements for the program are focused on the two statutory items. First, and the easiest part, is the tax rate that you're required to establish as a public library. And the second is simply your progress in meeting or towards meeting the standards as most recently established by the Illinois Library Association. And if you have the standards document at hand, to please begin reviewing all of the chapters and the checklist at the end of those chapters. Once you have become familiar with that and the checklist, I know that some libraries have already gone through this process. Navigating through this application should be quite easy. It's a series of 13 narrative questions about those checklists and what you've determined. So that simplifies that, we do hope. There will be no further requirements as far as a continuing education program to fulfill, no review of the library trustee fax file. This next item, I guess, and in response to what's already been stated about the meeting that occurred last Wednesday, the discussion that occurred at the consortium meeting this week, which Paul mentioned about COVID and the discussion that's going to occur later, The state library and the state archives has moved forward a request, and it has been reviewed and supported by the Secretary of State and the State Librarian's Office for the Department of Public Health to weigh in on this conversation about quarantining and, you know, what other guidelines may be necessary. So that has moved forward. I do not have their response today, and I don't know when, you know, we can expect that. Excuse me, there's a train.
Yeah. Notice.
It is not a hurricane, it is a train, or tornado.
I live by a train track too.
You know, we can anticipate that, and I know that the discussion will occur later in the meeting today, so. It is a request, as the realm study is for archives, libraries, and museums. It seems appropriate that the state archive join in that request as well.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Any questions for Greg in the State Library? Okay, thank you. So at this point, we'll move on to item number 8, new business. 8.1 is the approval of the recommendation of the Executive Committee for the appointment of the board of the Academic Library representative. As many of you know, we are missing a board member for one of our board members resigned, Gwen, who many of you knew, and the executive board member, the executive committee has met, and we interviewed several people, and we had recommended Jennifer McIntosh, and Jennifer is the Associate Dean of the Library of the College of DuPage, who we have recommended to fill that position. Jennifer has been at the College of DuPage for the last 12 years, 4 as the Dean, and has worked at Malcolm X College, Prairie State College, and Casper College in Wyoming. She has internship experience with the City of Chicago Office of Budget and Management, Chicago History Museum, and is the chair of the network of the Illinois Learning Resources in Community Colleges. Jennifer would be, as I said, filling the term of Gwen Gregory, which ends July 1st, 2023. So what we would need is a motion and a second to approve that recommendation of the Executive Committee. So could I get a motion for that?
So
please?
moved. McCone Chase.
Diane Hollister, second.
Thank you. Emily, will you please call the roll?
Sure. Sue Busenberg,
Yes.
Michael Campbell,
Yes.
Ellie Cox,
Yes.
Percy Harris,
Yes.
Diane Hollister,
Yes.
Chris Kenny,
Yes.
Sarah McCone Chase,
Yes.
Paul Mills,
Yes.
Jenna Namek-Luisi,
Yes.
Scott Poynton,
Yes.
Becky Spratford,
Yes.
Thomas Stagg,
Yes.
Beth Tuppen,
Yes.
and Alex Messina.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So that passes, and so I believe we'll.
I have contacted all the candidates
Okay.
so that they wouldn't, be
We'll
surprised.
sort
And
her
I'll,
out at the
we'll,
next meeting.
yes, we'll be in touch with Jennifer,
Okay.
obviously, yes.
Okay, item 8.2 is the discussion of the use of the consent agenda and our voting procedures. And this is a discussion and action requested. This has come up from several board members who have spoken to myself and to Deidre about our how we vote and our agenda building. A memo and a sample consent agenda were included in the packet. many of us use a consent agenda in our local trustee library agendas. So rather than, filing motions on each item separately and conducting roll calls for each items, we just use it in one vote. Any questions, discussion points on that?
Well, obviously, you can take anything off the consent agenda
Right.
anytime you want. Yeah, I mean, it's completely up to you guys. It's probably become more noticeable since we're doing all the roll calls.
Mm-hmm.
And technically, you're supposed to randomize your roll call voting. It just never sort of came up. I knew it in my head, but I never.
And, I think Tom was the one who brought it up to me, was that the president should always be the last one to vote. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, we do that in our board
Yeah.
meetings,
Yeah.
always.
There's always something about parliamentary procedure that you can learn.
And with all the roll calls, the consent agenda is much more efficient,
Yeah.
So this proposal has the approval of expenditures on the consent agenda, so as well as the minutes and the agenda. So I leave that.
I don't know if what other people have seen, like today when Jim did the approval of the expenditures and it was $819,000, they always have to explicitly say how much that is.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I'm totally fine with it. I mean, one of the first conversations I had with my board when I became a library director is, by the time the expenditures are in front of you, they happened already. It's like, you can't say, no, I don't approve that, I don't want that to happen. We already did the thing.
Right.
So you can say, don't do that again, but you kind of have to approve the expenditures that have already happened and gone out the door. So I'm totally fine with this.
Also, I have to say, Lagrange, we moved to this type of agenda before pandemic, even before the current director, and so we've been doing that as part of it, approving the expenditures. We still have a treasurer's report with the full financials because you need to report them publicly.
Right.
But this is.
It doesn't affect the information you get in any way.
No.
Right.
Doesn't take away people's ability to ask questions
Right.
about any of it. It's fine.
Any other comments?
So, Michael, this is Paul Mills speaking. So, Michael, would you like a motion to approve this as presented with an amendment that the president always be the one to be called last for a roll call vote?
I think what we had discussed is to have a rotating roll call.
Yeah, that was the other thing. That was in there too.
So that it's
Yeah,
a randomized roll call.
Well, I think what Paul's saying is, do you want it to randomize and then still have
But
the,
But the president always be last, though, with the randomization.
President is
then
always
president.
last.
Yes,
Yes.
yeah.
You can do
So I
both.
would
Because
make,
the randomization was in there already.
right.
Emily will work her magic.
Make it more confusing for you, Emily.
You gotta pay attention. I can't just wait for Scott and then be ready.
Well, I do wait to hear Sarah's name, then I'm like, oh, I'm coming up.
Or Jenna's.
We have a second?
So, do we have a motion and a second for that?
I'll second it.
Paul Mills, yes. I'll move with the amendment that the president always be called last after randomization.
All righty, sounds good.
Okay.
Ally, I second.
Okay. So Emily, will you call roll?
Sue Busenbark,
Yes.
Michael Campbell,
Yes.
Ellie Cox,
Yes.
Percy Harris,
yes.
Diane Hollister,
Yes.
Chris Kenny,
Yes.
Sarah McCone Chase,
Yes.
Paul Mills,
Yes.
Jenna Nemec-Louisi,
Yes.
Scott Poynton,
Yes.
Becky Spratford,
Yes.
Thomas Stagg,
Yes.
Beth Teppen,
Yes.
and Alex Vincina.
Okay, thank you. That was easier than what I thought it was going to be.
Everybody's used to it.
Okay, we'll move to 8.3, intergovernment agreement with Prairie Cat for the IMRF membership. So Deidre and Jim.
Yes, I think I'll let Jim talk about it. And Carolyn Coulter's here too. She's the Executive Director of Prairie Cat, if you have any questions from Prairie Cat. So take it away, Jim.
Okay. The history of this goes back a little ways. We have presented a intergovernmental agreement with Prairie Cat. It's one of the first steps, but we've already been going through a number of steps for Prairie Cat to become reunited with and a member within the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund. Many of Prairie Cat's employees were with the IMRF when they were employees of Rails, but about over 2 years ago, Prairie Cat became independent, and their employees became our employees became Prairie Cat employees. So Prairie Cat launched an effort, which is almost a year old now, to seek readmission into the IMRF, and it hasn't progressed real fast, but it finally revved up a few months ago, and after the IMRF's preliminary review of financial information that Prairie Cat submitted, and one of the requirements of the pension law is that if an entity joins the IMRF, they have to have a guarantee, preferably of its members or entities within that entity, that the required contributions are going to be made. This was very impractical and impossible for Prairie Cat, as they have 130 members, and some of them are not even IMRF members. And the IMRF initially was insisting on a separate IGA, revised IGA with every member. So we talked with Prairie Cat, and we suggested that through our discussions that Rails would provide that first guarantee to the IMRF, and the IMRF has approved that. So the intergovernmental agreement before you has been reviewed by IMRF, and they are okay with it. The contribution based on preliminary numbers would be monthly contribution would approximate less than $9,000, $8,650. But and what this says is that Rails would make this contribution if the Prairie Cat was not able to. As a practical matter, since Rails does the accounting for Prairie Cat, and we are well aware of their financial situation, we would know well in advance if such a situation were in the process of developing, and I would expect that we would take whatever steps would be needed to prevent this, so that we would never get to this point. But it's not a guarantee, though. And then as a secondary guarantee, if somehow Rails became out of existence, there is a provision that we try to get a successor guarantee to this, which probably would be the members of Prairie Cat or some other entity. But this is a required step for Prairie Cat to join IMRF, and there are a number of steps that will happen after this, including the submission of this to the IMRF and their review of Prairie Cat's financials and determination of a contribution rate, a final contribution rate, and the approval of Prairie Cat's members. And so we are asking for your approval for us to go ahead and enter into this agreement. And Carolyn, do you have anything else to add to this?
No, you did a very good job, Jim. Thank you very much. I just want to thank you for considering this. It is something that our staff really desires. Over half of Prairie Cat staff is vested in IMRF, and most of the rest of us have contributions laying there. And we, when we initially separated from Rails, as far as our staff was concerned, we tried to apply to IMRF, and they, because we had never funded staff in the past, they would not entertain our application. And as Jim said, now they are willing to do so. They've run some preliminary numbers which look acceptable. And so if we can get beyond this contribution hurdle, I think we are on our way to getting this approved. So I'm happy to answer any questions. And again, I'm very appreciative of Rails, you know, coming up to the plate and helping us out here. It's very, very generous, and it's appreciated.
If I could say a couple things about this too. You know, we have been, all of you who've been on the board and have been, even if not paying attention to system funding over the years, we started a few years ago an effort with the consortia to the LSAPs to urge them to become more financially independent for their own sake and for the sake of the libraries, their members, and for the patrons. The LSAPs are way too important to communities and individuals who use libraries to be completely dependent on state funding, which, as we know, can, if not disappear, can certainly be cut unexpectedly. So, you know, Prairie Cat took this step most recently of the LSAPs. Swan did a number of years ago. And you know, it is a good thing. They have to be able to, you know, stand on their own feet, so to speak. So you know, in our minds, this is a benefit to the libraries, the members, a benefit to the taxpayers, because it will help make ultimately Prairie Cat stronger. RSA is the one remaining LSAP that whose employees are employees of Rails, and we have been talking with them, you know, for a number of years now about also becoming independent. That is, you know, financially independent, employing their own staff. So they, you know, RSA has had conversations. I know they completed a strategic plan not that long ago. They've had conversations, Kendall has, with Carolyn about the possibilities of them merging if things got bad at some point. Or even if they just figured that that was a good thing to do, which it might be, who knows. Certainly this IMRF piece would be very attractive to RSA staff and to RSA because they are in IMRF currently. So it just kind of, you know, smooths a path that we may want to go down at some point. I don't think I'm saying anything that I've never said to Kendall or all of his members. So anyway, I think it's definitely the right thing to do, and hopefully it will never come to pass. Right, Carolyn?
Yes, I live in ardent hope that it never does come to pass.
Right.
We will be certainly watching the financial situation, as we always do.
So this is Scott. I think this is a good thing. It needs to happen. But I have one question. So really, you know, this is saying Rails is going to financially backstop that, but there is the, you know, unless Rails wants to terminate and get out with 6 months notice. So really the only thing that Rails is really risking here is 6 months of covering it if whatever, in the absolute worst case scenario.
Right.
But has this gone past the Rails attorney?
Yes.
They're all good with it?
Yep.
Okay.
This is Paul. My only, this conversation I had with Deirdre and also with Jim, when I read this one, I'm like Scott, I think this is a good thing. I'm very supportive of this. One thing I just think for the board to consider going forward is that as we do this for one of the LSAPs, in this case Prairie Cat, we do need to keep in mind that we may be approached by other officially recognized LSAPs in Rails for a similar support. And again, I don't think that should change. It certainly doesn't change how I feel about this. I think this is a great thing. I just think we need to be cognizant as a board that we may see other requests down the road from the other LSAPs as well, because IMRIF is a very good thing.
It's a
Sure.
precedent.
Yes, it's a precedent. Thank you, sir.
It's a what?
A precedent. that we're
Yes,
setting.
it is, but
Yes.
it's not, it doesn't mean we have to do something. You know, I think just as we have had this conversation here and we had it, you know, Jim and Carolyn, there's many benefits, there's many financial benefits to a lot of people, including taxpayers.
Agreed.
So, potentially anyway, so.
This is Becky. I think Dee's point about getting all the LSAPs to be financially independent, because I've watched this happen in my years in libraries. I think that's been a big bonus in terms of the library landscape, as Dee explained, especially from that financial standpoint, and to preserve the LSAPs for the patrons. So I think that, yes, while this sets a precedent, if it helps this go forward and it helps others merge, and, you know, we need to do what we can as Rails to help encourage that independence. So
Exactly.
this is a good step forward.
Yeah, this is Scott, I agree, and not doing it means that it's made more difficult for Perrycat to attract and hire quality
That's
employees.
Yes.
Great point.
It's a disincentive to work there, so, yeah.
True.
Yes.
Which is bad for all of us.
Yes.
Okay, so can I have a motion for approval of the intergovernmental agreement with Prairie Crack for the IMRF membership?
Paul Mills, so moved.
And a second?
Alex Mancina, second.
Okay, so Paul moved and second by Alex, and brain freeze. Emily, will you call roll, please?
Sue Busenberg,
Yes.
Michael Campbell,
Yes.
Kelly Cox,
Yes.
Percy Harris. Did we lose you, Percy? Diane Hollister,
Yes.
Chris Kenny,
Yes.
Sarah McCone Chase,
Yes.
Paul Mills,
Yes.
Jenna Namek-Luisi,
Yes.
Scott Poynton,
Yes.
Becky Spratford,
Yes.
Thomas Stagg,
Yes.
Beth Tuppen,
Yes.
and Alex Mancina.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you.
you very
Moving-
much. I appreciate it. And the staff of Prairie Cat greatly appreciate your support.
Great. Moving on to item number 8.4, membership change and action requested. Dan?
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. So this is a request from LAD Community Consolidated School District 94. The genesis of this actually came from the Illinois State Library. They reached out to the Illinois State Library to apply for the annual school library district grant. And Karen Egan forwarded them to me because at that point they were not part of the system. And I started the process with Michelle Zico from LAD CCSD 94. We met virtually over Zoom on Tuesday, October 13th. We talked a little bit about their services and the things they do for their school district. They're a one school district. It serves K through 8. They have around 196 students. They serve the Ladd and Spring Valley communities, which are located in Bureau County. They are looking to join Rails for that Illinois School District Library grant. As I mentioned, that's a huge one for them. Also, when we talked, we discussed eRead Illinois, other grants that we have to offer, including the CE grant and the My Library Is grant, and just the ability to do the things like deals and discounts and other resources that we offer. So that's my presentation. Does anybody have any questions for me about this membership recommendation?
If this is Paul Mills, if I may. I know it's a shame, Dan, that you had to do this virtually because Ladd, Illinois is famous for Rip's Tavern that has multi-block long lines for their fried chicken. So I hope you need to find you need to find a reason to go out and do a visit when it's feasible, Dan. Just fried chicken.
Paul.
Rip's Tavern. Yes.
When I just Googled Ladd, Illinois, because I had no idea where it was, Google immediately let me know that that's where Rip's
Tavern. Yes.
I've received that recommendation from my colleague Brian Smith on about 7 or 8 occasions. So I will eventually I will eventually use it. Yep.
Excellent.
I do want to make a general comment though. I love that you have to be in Rails to get the grant. No, I mean, but we're trying to get everybody to be part of something together, and sometimes it's not that they don't want to, they just don't know. And so I'm glad we have that relationship where the state library can send them to us so that we can get them into the fold, and then maybe they can tell some of their friends. And it ties in really nicely with Jenna's upcoming presentation later too, so.
Okay. So can I have a motion for approval of the Ladd School District 94 for Rails membership and the request for final approval from the Illinois State Library?
So moved. This is Jenna.
Thank you, Jenna. And a second?
I'll second. This is Scott.
Thank you, Scott. So Emily, will you please call roll?
Sue Busenbark,
Yes.
Michael Campbell,
Yes.
Kelly Cox,
Yes.
Percy Harris,
Yes.
Diane Hollister,
Yes.
Chris Kenny,
Yes.
Sarah McCone Chase,
Yes.
Paul Mills,
Yes.
Anna Nemecluisi,
Yes.
Scott Poynton,
Yes.
Becky Spratford,
Yes.
Thomas Stagg,
Yes.
Beth Tippin,
Yes.
and Alex Vancina.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so now we move to item number 9, unfinished business. 9.1 is board members and committees. This is for discussion only. I think there's been some discussion around the number of board members on a committee, some things like that. So
Yeah, I just want to be sure everybody's happy, I guess, essentially, with that we have the right information with their committees. Because, going back, sometimes we really limited how many board members could be on a committee. Sometimes we didn't have enough interest in different committees. But, a lot of people want to be on the EDI committee. We have a lot of board members on universal service. I think it's fantastic. I just wanted to be sure that everybody was happy. That's all. Very important to have a happy board committee members.
Well, thank you for being concerned about that.
Well, sure. Because it's always a little cumbersome when it changes over, because we have a new president, we have new board members. They don't, the new board members don't necessarily know what the committees do. So I just want to be sure that everybody was good with it at this point. So that's all. Really, it was more from Emily and me, I think.
yeah, and if you see that you are on, if you want to be on a different committee, or if you want to be on a committee, please let.
And you can go to the meetings anyway.
Yes, exactly.
It's just.
Yeah.
Didn't used to be so much of an issue because we didn't have as many interesting committees.
And people didn't want to be on committees.
Well,
yes.
There's a limit to
The
how.
committee is so fun. Come and join us. We have a great time. We do great work.
Well, some people love policy and some people don't, so. Yeah. Personally, I love policy. But anyway, so.
Just if you do have your, make sure, I noticed on the EDI committee, Diane is the chairman.
Right.
Of the,
Yeah, I was going to say that.
We got to update that, yes. Sorry, Diane. We just.
Any other comments on the committee stuff? Yeah, okay. So let's move into the ever-present COVID.
Unfortunately, for now, yeah.
Length of quarantine of materials and delivery.
Right, well, you heard some public comment, about this, the length. We discussed it last month. I wrote about it in my report, Greg mentioned it. So essentially, from my perspective, we at Rails believe that, 3 days is abundantly cautious. We know that some places are going to 1 day, and we debated that. We just still erring on the side of caution, sticking with 3. But, I just want the board to understand and to be supportive of our decision to not do what Heartland and Carly are doing, and to basically not do what Ann Craig and Carly asked, which is to everybody do the same thing.
And they're staying with 7?
I guess they're waiting to hear from IDPH. So I don't know, because of the train went by, I don't think, Greg, that you said anything about when you might hear from IDPH, right?
I don't know when we might have that answer.
So just based on what we've read and seen, of course, it's all over the place still. In my report, I put that Oregon thing in, makes sense to me. 28 days comes out of Australia for some other reason. But I think at this point, what, Megan made, very good points in terms of we still don't have any, well, maybe one case that we know of in the entire world, as I understand it, where somebody might have gotten something, might have gotten it from a surface, an elevator button or something. We've always run a germy business, we know this.
That's the only thing they ever touched.
And don't think about where books go,
Or currency.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But stick at the libraries, but anyway. So, I'm not so concerned about deciding to go with 3 days as I am that you understand that this is we're marching forward to our own drummer only at this point.
But this is Paul Mills, and if I can say, I think that's a very good decision on Rail's part, and I'm also, very confident in Rail's leadership in making this decision. So I will just say, personally, to me, this is an operational decision that Rails is making, and I don't really necessarily know that, you need board impromptu to do it. I think it's important you've informed us that there might be some dissonance in how the rest of the states is handling it, but I certainly think moving to a 3-day quarantine for Rails, which in all practical impacts does radiate to all the member libraries, is a very logical decision to make.
Yeah, this is Scott. I would add to that. I did some brief research this week, and for every state that is treating this like where the whole state has the same quarantine period, there's 2 or 3 states that don't. Like it's not a majority of states that are unified across their entire state. Much more than half of the states are just a hodgepodge within the state. So it's not that big of a deal, I don't think, if we break ranks a little bit in Rails and do our own thing, in my opinion.
This is Becky. I have a question, because I'm all for going 3 days, but I have heard of a few libraries that are in Rails who have straight up said they're going to go to 1 day.
So have we.
Okay, so how does that happen? Do they just hold Rails materials for 3 days?
They've always had the option to quarantine their own stuff or not.
Okay.
For as long as they chose.
So that I do think that even with this change, that is going to happen. So when we're talking about Scott's point that the whole state isn't doing things the same way, it's not even Rails is going to have everybody doing things the same way within the next coming days, I think.
Right, but to be clear, it was Rails delivery quarantine and Heartland delivery quarantine, and therefore ergo the ILDS, the Illinois Library Delivery System.
I understand, but libraries I spoke to about the 7-day they said it would be even extra work to extricate out the things that were Rails. So it is really, although libraries always could do what they wanted, it was prohibitive for many libraries to separate out.
Right, the one, this is Scott, Becky, some of the ones that I've heard that have said what you mentioned a minute ago are standalones. Like larger standalones, it's much easier for them to say, we'll just do our own thing, and anything that's going into a bin through Rails, we'll do what they want.
But most libraries, it's not. So they were doing the Rails. And so the 3 will be appreciated, I think, by many.
Yeah. The patrons will certainly appreciate it.
Oh, gosh, the number of phone calls at just my little library.
This is Percy. Let me reach out to my contact at IDPH to see what the delay is on getting a response back. I think one of the biggest things that and I think I brought this up the last time, they forgot about libraries. They really don't consider us, what's a nice way of saying it? Essential.
You don't have to be nice.
Well, they
don't think of libraries being essential. So
Sure.
let me reach out to my contact and see, can I get a response real quick? Because that's one of the things, and I'll bring this up again since I am trying to put together this webinar next month. Actually, that came from Jordan. I'll put that question to the team about how many days should the books be quarantined. I kind of agree with the 3 days instead of 7. I think that's totally ridiculous. I'll even say a couple of hours, to be honest with you. But I will get back to you guys as soon as possible.
That's great, Percy.
So this is Scott. I guess this is just a question about the agenda. I mean, are we looking for action, and if so, a motion to approve that? Or is that like, are we just being informed?
I've had this discussion, my opinion was that I agree with Paul, this is an operational issue.
Yeah.
And, that I think that this lies with the management of Rails and not as a board that we should vote on this.
So we're just weighing in, but it's really.
Yes.
Right. I just wanted you to get the whole picture and be comfortable.
We needed to be informed, but I don't think it's something that we need to take action on.
So do we have a date, or like when is this in effect?
We don't, but I'm not next week, Monday, right? No reason not to. But we haven't done anything about it yet. So,
okay.
Yeah, but sure.
I mean, it's been the state conference and some other stuff going on.
But yeah, I mean, it doesn't. Yeah, we just need to get our talking points and our. Yeah. So ASAP.
Unless somebody else has any major, objections, Okay.
This is Paul Mills. The only thing I'll add is there's a really good Washington Post article that was published, I believe, yesterday. Pretty, I think they're making it free. If you're not a subscriber, I think that it's not behind their paywall. Their title was "Stop Wiping Down Groceries and Focus on Bigger Risks." Say experts on coronavirus transmission. It's good. They quote people from the CDC, other scientific authorities. It's a good read. I would recommend it if you have a moment.
I can forward it to you all because I am a subscriber. So I'll do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And obviously, we'll keep you all in the loop. And, we'll let Heartland and Carly know, too, if they haven't already heard us.
Okay. So we'll move to the next section, which is board development, which is something we do every month. 10.1 is board member reports. And this month, we're talking about school libraries, trends and challenges with Jenna.
Yay! Okay, quick FYI, I'm really excited to do my presentation, but for about the last 10 minutes, I've been having internet issues at home, which Deirdre knows I was having internet issues earlier this week when I was trying to prep our presentation for ILA. So the wonderful Ryan has been admitting me several times during the last 5 minutes of the discussion. I'm hoping to hang in there for my presentation, but if I fade out or anything like that, know that it's not because I don't love you. It's because the internet at my house does not love me. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen here. I have a brief slideshow for us. I know that my time slot is about 5 to 10 minutes. I'm going to try to pack as much into those 10 minutes as I can. But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen first. And you're probably going to get the agenda first. So we don't want that. We want this. So can everyone see this okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Thumbs up. Okay. So what I've been asked to present on today and what I'm really excited to talk about and share with you are trends, challenges, and opportunities for school libraries. And I'd like to talk about them in terms of national scope, as well as state level implications, and finally ending with what Rails can do and continue to do to advocate for strong and meaningful school librarianship in libraries across our state and within our service area. So for those of us who don't know me very well, I know we have some new board members, or for those of us who would like a refresher, I thought it might be helpful to just give you a little bit of information on my background. I am the elected member to our school library seat on the Rails board. By day, I'm Director of Library and Information Literacy at North Shore Country Day, which is a JK through 12 independent school in Winnetka, Illinois. I got my master's degree in library science from Dominican almost 20 years ago, and right now I'm working on my PhD in library and information science at Dominican. My area of interest and what I'm planning to write my dissertation on is international school library impact. And essentially my problem statement for my dissertation is, why have all of these advocacy efforts that we have done for school libraries, particularly the state level school library impact studies, why have those impact studies really failed to have the impact that we have hoped that they would have? Why, when we have all of these regression analyses that are saying there's a strong correlation between the presence of school librarians and school libraries in schools and the academic achievement test scores that students are achieving, why are we still losing school library programs? Why are we still losing school librarians? And that's one of the trends that I'm going to talk about as we approach one of our next slides. And my sense is that we're looking at school library impact, and my strong belief is we're looking at school library impact a little too narrowly. Throughout the United States and sometimes abroad in other countries, we're defining school library impact as academic achievement, when we have a lot of anecdotal evidence and other evidence that shows that school librarians impact students in more than just academic ways. We do more than just help students become better students. We help students become who they're in the process of becoming. And that's kind of my angle with school library impact and what I'm hoping to study by looking at school library impact studies in the United Kingdom as part of my dissertation, and perhaps what US researchers can learn from those school library impact studies. So by night, I'm an adjunct instructor at the School of Information Studies at Dominican. I teach 2 classes there. I teach issues of access, advocacy, and policy in youth services librarianship. And I'll be teaching a brand new course this coming summer term, which is called Writing for the Library and Information Science Profession. So I'm pretty excited about that. I am chair-elect of the Independent Schools section of the American Association of School Librarians, and I'm the continuing education manager for the Association of Illinois School Library Educators. So my research interests, I've already let you know about my school library impact. I'm also really interested in the information behavior of preschool students and how pre-readers look for and seek out information and how they process that information and how they create information. And I'm also very interested in the art of storytelling for advocacy. So kind of correlating with my doctoral research, I'm really interested in how we can tell better advocacy stories for schools and stories that are more than just data driven. And I know I get a lot of pushback, and this is going to be my contribution to the scholarly community. Our administrators, our funders, our trustees, they want data, they want numbers. And I agree with that, but I also think we need to flip the narrative. There's more to telling a story than just numbers. And so I think that in addition to balancing our advocacy efforts with really great stories and anecdotes and incorporating the advocacy of non-library partners, I think we need to educate our administrators and our funders and our trustees that there's a different side of the story that's not just numbers driven, and that's a big part of school library impact. So that's me. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next part of our presentation. So I thought to frame the challenges and trends and the opportunities that we have in school librarianship, I think it's important for us as a board to take a look at the national and state level standards for school libraries and school librarians. And there are actually two areas that I want to focus on. First is the National School Library Standards for Learners, School Librarians, and School Libraries. And so these were published in 2018 by AASL. And it's a really thick book. I have it right here. I don't know if you can see it. It's this really thick book of standards that's got different areas of opportunity for us to engage students in their learning, their collaborating, their thinking, their critical analysis. And what is especially germane to our conversation is two definitions from this book. Those are the definitions of an effective school library and the definitions of a qualified school librarian, which are going to impact everything that we're talking about in terms of challenges, trends, and opportunities for school libraries. The first is the definition of an effective school library, and this is directly from the standards. An effective school library has a certified school librarian at the helm, provides personalized learning environments, and offers equitable access to resources to ensure a well-rounded education for every learner. And I think that this is really important because that well-rounded education has to include more than academic preparation, in my opinion, as a researcher. Next is the definition of a qualified school librarian. In addition to meeting state certification requirements, qualified school librarians hold a master's degree or equivalent from a program that combines academic and professional preparation in library and information science, education, and technology. The graduate degree is earned at a college or university whose program is recognized by appropriate bodies, and those bodies are those that are accredited by state boards of education, the American Library Association, etc. So I think starting with the national scope is really important because as we move on to the IL standards, which are called Linking for Learning, they were published in the same year. The 4th edition was published in the same year as the AASL standards. These standards in the state of Illinois, and what's going to be really specific to our purposes at Rails, these standards build upon the AASL national standards, particularly those definitions of an effective school library program and a qualified school librarian. What I really like about these standards is that they include library level and administration level standards. So the state of Illinois, these IL standards include more than just what the school librarian should do, but what administrators should do as well. These standards also incorporate the federal Every Student Succeeds Act, which is the next generation of No Child Left Behind in our current legislation federally that mentions effective school library programs, even though there isn't currently a federal funding line for school libraries or school librarians. And it also includes the State of Illinois Administrative Code for School Libraries, which stipulates that all schools should have a library program, but it doesn't necessarily incorporate all of the standards that AASL or IL includes, such as the certification standards and other qualifications. The Linking for Learning standards includes 4 areas of responsibility: planning and instruction, learning environment, library administration, and leadership. And I bring all of these standards up because as we talk about challenges, you'll see that we have this national level and this state level sets of standards, which are not really currently reflected in the trends of school libraries and school librarians. And the challenges that we face seem really counterproductive to these standards. So I thought it was important for us to have this framework as we move on. So what are the state and national trends that impact libraries, school librarians, and school library advocates in 2020? 3 big ones, I think, and this is based on my research. This is based on what I have been able to synthesize in all of my work with school libraries. The first trend is that the need for qualified school librarians is increasing, not just during pandemic learning, but in general. We need to prepare our students for success in school and also in life. And school librarians, as the heart of a learning community in a school, bear a lot of responsibility in terms of that preparation. And so the first trend here, while the need for qualified school librarians is increasing in many ways, The unfortunate trend too is that the number of effective school libraries and qualified school librarians in schools is decreasing. Some of that has to do with the fact that our messages are not reaching the ears of the people who need to hear them. We do a really good job as librarians with talking to each other. We don't necessarily excel at taking the conversation beyond libraries and taking them to administrators, to boards of education, to our federal lawmakers, to our policymakers. And so we have this really strange counterbalance of needing more school librarians, but seeing a decrease in the number of effective school libraries that we have and school librarians. Now, something that Christy Samandi brought up, our IL president, in our ILA presentation earlier this week, is that there are administrators who want to hire qualified school librarians, but they are telling us that they are not having applicants that meet the state level qualifications for a school librarian. So on the other hand, we do have administrators who see the value, but they're not finding qualified applicants, which is another challenge that, that we have. Trend number 3, which builds upon trend number 1 and trend number 2. School library advocacy is becoming more challenging, more difficult, and even more imperative than it ever has been. As we see the number of school library programs decreasing, as we see the qualified school librarian numbers decreasing in our schools, it's never been more important for us to advocate. But I think that the way that we need to advocate is changing. The ways that we have been approaching it in the past have not worked. And I think we need to start flipping the narrative and start thinking outside the box and how we can do better with that. So those are some of the trends. So what are some of the challenges? So those trends sound like challenges, but here's a little bit more of a finer point. There are 3 big challenges that I see affecting school libraries at local, state, and national levels. There are staffing challenges, ranking and status challenges, and funding challenges. None of this probably comes as a surprise to anybody because these are things that affect libraries in general. But in schools, here's what we're seeing. If school libraries, particularly in Illinois, are staffed at all, most often they're being staffed by a technician or a paraprofessional rather than a qualified librarian. And some of that comes from not having qualified applicants. Some of that is coming from administrators saying, well, anybody can come in and check books out to kids and help them get on the internet or use their iPad or whatever. We don't need to have a qualified educator to do that necessarily. So some of it I think is perception. Some of it is the reality of not getting qualified applicants. Some of it is schools redirecting their budgets, especially during pandemic learning, to what they consider more essential services. And particularly during pandemic learning, we're seeing our school libraries being dismantled so that we can create more classrooms to de-densify learning spaces in schools. Some of it is the idea that we've got to redirect funding to other resources that can support students and not this perception that the school library and the school librarian is still the heart of the school. This is something that has affected me personally in my work as a school librarian, and that's rank and status. So many school librarians have a staff rank rather than a faculty rank. And what you saw, I hope, in those school library standards is that we are being certified as educators. We are teachers just as much as we are librarians. We are teacher librarians, but we're not always given a faculty contract. We're given a staff contract. And in some ways, that helps this, that aids and feeds this perception that we're not real teachers or that we're not real educators. Or sometimes we're perceived by our peers as, I don't care what you do with these kids for the next 40 minutes as long as I don't have them. It's a prep period for teachers. And that's not every teacher. I work in an extremely collaborative and partnership-oriented school where this is not necessarily the case, but it has been the case for me before. And so this is also going to feed into that first challenge of staffing. If librarians are not considered essential educators, administrators are going to continue to decide not to hire them. And then finally, funding, it's an ongoing thing. Lack of funding at district, state, and national levels really keeps us from hiring qualified librarians and maintaining effective school library programs. The fact that there isn't a federal funding line for school libraries is really problematic. The fact that there isn't necessarily a mandate in the state of Illinois for us to have certified professional librarians in every school contributes to this funding issue. So those are some challenges that we're facing. And lastly, so it's not all doom and gloom. It's really not. There are some great things that are going on. Here are some opportunities for us and where I think Rails can continue to move forward with supporting school libraries. We can continue to collaborate and forge those partnerships that we already have with school librarians, with ISLE and the Illinois State Library. And I don't mean to get all mushy-gushy here, but I really do think that we are a relationship-driven profession. And the more that we can forge relationships with school librarians themselves, talking with individual school librarians, and I think a lot of the work that Dan does about bringing the word about Rails and Rails membership to individual school libraries, the more that we can listen to school librarians, hear their stories, and understand their challenges at individual building level situations, the better we're going to be able to educate ourselves. And that's our next section here. Educating ourselves individually as staff, a Rails staff, and as a Rails board about the issues that school libraries face. I would love it if we could all kind of get our fingers on the pulse of what's going on in the school libraries and the communities that we live in and that we work in. Hearing those school library stories, learning more about how we can forge those collaborations. Because I think that as we hear those individual stories and we really hear from individual school librarians what's going on and what they're up against, and even the successes that they're enjoying, the better we're going to be able to continue advocating, which is our final opportunity. I really believe, and we're getting better at this as a profession, creating and delivering school library messaging to non-library audiences is key. Again, we're really good at talking to ourselves. We're really good at talking about the essential work that we do, but how are we going to get people who make the decisions and spend the money and allocate the money and really have that influence in some ways that school librarians don't at the individual.
So close.
She almost made it.
Are you gone, Jenna?
It's weird that she's gone, but her slides are still
Her
there.
PowerPoint remains.
Right, and nobody can change that, can they? Do we have to?
No, she's a co-host.
Whoa.
You know, I have to.
She's. Oh, wait, I saw her moving.
Am I back?
You're back.
Yeah, you're back.
Okay, sorry. How much did you miss?
Just a very,
Very little bit.
Okay, let me go back real quick. Okay, how much of this did you miss? Did you get collaborate and educate?
Yeah.
And advocate.
Okay. Okay, advocate. I just basically, before you lose me again, I would love for us to be better about getting our message out to non-library audiences because we're really good at talking to ourselves. We need to be better at talking to funders, to school administrators, to lawmakers, all that. I'm going to put a pin in it now and see if anybody has questions, comments, discussion before my internet leaves me and I leave you because I don't want to do that. So anybody want to ask me, express, contribute to the conversation?
This is Becky. Jenna, I have another thing to add to your advocacy piece because I've done some consulting with some school libraries in the state of Illinois, and you know who doesn't listen to us? Teachers. I would love to see Rails. I would love to see Rails and the work you did at the state conference to go to a teacher conference because the entire library, so the Aurora School District, East Aurora, is a K through 12. I was working with their libraries last year and their library staff, and the biggest complaint they have, and this is a small thing, but it magnifies the problem, the teachers won't allow the children to check out graphic novels. The two qualified librarians who then have a staff that they deploy at all the schools had me come in and we were talking about talking points, for example, to tell the teachers that graphic novels are reading, literally disobeying the professional librarians. And the administration backs them up for their purchasing, but the teachers can cause a lot of damage.
I agree.
We don't get to that. And so that's an area of advocacy I think we would really, speaking of not just talking to the regular people, we need to get at a school library conference.
I 100% agree with you. And this goes back to what I was trying to get at under school library challenges here under rank and status. We are often not regarded as peer educators. by our peers. We are, it's a prep period. It's all the librarian does is check out books. A lot of the work that I have done in my career has been around advocating to my teacher colleagues about what a school librarian can do. And I'm still doing that at my school. It's a lot of fun, and fortunately I have a receptive audience, but sometimes we're not considered a real teacher, and we're not considered a real teacher by our peers, like you were saying, and we're not sometimes considered a real teacher by our administrators. And again, that is not the case at my school. I am extremely fortunate, but it is the case at a lot of other schools. So I agree with you. Getting in front of teachers, going to a teacher conference, something like that, or even at the district level, would be really imperative.
I think it's just but what often occurs to me is that, in general, I think people do not understand what librarians do, period. I don't care what kind of librarian you are. I think that you read all day, and I think, it's unbelievable to me. Some of my friends who should know better, who were like, so what do you do all day, And when I tell them, they're like, so I think in a school library, it's probably, it's even more so, and because not only do they not understand generally what a librarian does, but then you take this part about how you're not a real educator. Which I know that just makes the advocacy problem bigger, but I also think, as you and Jenna, you and I have talked in the past at the advocacy committee meetings, I do think that there is also value in speaking with one librarian voice to try to get that point across about what librarians do first, and that's the collaboration piece, so.
I think that, this is Scott, I think that what frustrates me is, I can just hear school administrators, superintendents saying, well, this is an unfunded mandate if we do all those things that we want to have happen. But really, the unfunded mandates happened 15 years ago, which pinched them financially, which caused them to do this to their own librarians. So we're not the unfunded mandate. It was all those other things that caused their budget difficulties and then caused them to underfund their librarians.
It's been going on for decades.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
Very, very frustrating.
Yeah, and I think, we've talked about going to administrators' conferences. We talked about, one of the great things that I think that AASL did, and Sylvia Norton came to a board meeting and talked about this group of school administrators that she had put together, or that AASL put together, that would go out and talk about the importance of school libraries. I would love to do that in Illinois, but everybody's so busy, it's just, busy people are the right ones to ask, but still, I do have to tell you a good thing. So since, the whole pandemic has, I think, definitely pointed up the need for e-resources, and it certainly made things more difficult for school libraries in many ways, but they have certainly taken advantage of the opportunity that eRead Illinois presents. We have had 50 new schools join eRead since March. 50, which is fantastic.
That's
so
amazing.
At least we're getting, I feel good that Rails is getting, some good resources to them. That's a lot in not that many months.
Okay, thank you, Jenna.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna.
Sorry about my tech issues. I'm glad it held up for the most part.
Great job.
Okay. As we wind down here, we move to number 11, agenda building for the next Rails meeting. The next board meeting will be held on Friday, November 20th. So that's different than our normal timing. Please note that that is the third Friday of the month due to the Thanksgiving holiday. Grant Halter will present on measuring the impact of the Rails programs and services on members. And Haley Cox will report on trends and challenges for special libraries. So thank you, Haley. So any other items that we should consider for the next agenda building? Okay. Okay, with that, we will move to the adjournment. So thank you all for attending, and I hereby adjourn this meeting at 2:56 p.m. Thank you.